Thanks, Jill. And hello, my name's Patrick Griffiths. I'm a senior business advisor for the Minority Business Accelerator for the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber. And I'm happy to serve as today's moderator for today's session on the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loans. As with all of our daily briefings, we will provide you with timely and factual insights into how our Cincinnati region is responding to the COVID-19 crisis. We're featuring experts in various fields, sharing information so that you can make informed decisions within your own businesses and organizations. There are more briefings to come, and you can find information on register for those briefings at our current schedule located at cincinnatiChamber.com/business briefings. Before we launch into today's call, I briefly want to mention two other resources that may be helpful to you. The Cincinnati Chamber launched a business response helpline yesterday that you may call during regular business hours. We'll pull information from our databases and research and the resources available to us to respond to your questions as quickly as possible. Also, if you haven't signed up for the Chamber's newsletter, we're sending daily COVID updates to all newsletter recipients. You can find your way to this and other resources at www.cincinnatiChamber.com. Look for the COVID-19 link on our homepage. A little bit of housekeeping. As we get started, I want to inform you that you've joined this briefing in a listen-only mode. Your microphones are intentionally muted. You may submit questions for Josh in real time by typing your questions through the Zoom Q&A window. Take a few seconds now to find that window so you know where to type. I also want to remind you that we're going to attempt to cover as many questions as we can, but we've only allocated 1 hour for our discussion today, and the first 30 minutes will belong to Joshua and myself as we moderate through the script. Please note as well that this session is being recorded and will be available for you later in case you need to refresh on some of the material. It'll be posted to the Cincinnati Chamber's website, and it'll also be on our Facebook page. Now, on with today's briefing. I want to introduce you to Joshua Stutzman. He's the SBA's Cincinnati branch manager. Joshua manages the strategic efforts and daily operations for the SBA's activities in the counties within and surrounding the Cincinnati metropolitan area. Joshua has over 9 years of federal government service. Prior to his federal service, he worked in the business and sales field and office management for more than a dozen years in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in Miami, Florida. Joshua also served in the United States Army for nearly 2 decades and currently serves in the Army Reserves. Joshua is a native to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Cincinnati and his MBA from Thomas More College in Northern Kentucky. That's a little bit about Josh. I've laid out the ground rules. Josh, are you ready to get started?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Pat.
Josh, I've been on calls for about the last week with small businesses in and around Cincinnati and the lower Dayton area who are trying to navigate this crisis financially. Many are hurting, everybody's scared, and some are already out of cash. We know you can't wave a magic wand and resolve these issues, but can you characterize the way the SBA has responded to this rapidly changing environment, and even as recent as last night?
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Pat. The SBA is here to assist small businesses with accessing federal resources and navigating their own preparedness plans as described by the CDC's guidance for businesses and employers. But the main thing is right now, today, we're going to be talking about the economic injury disaster loans and the accessibility of staff. We have made resources available and staff is available 7 days a week to answer questions, as a lot of businesses, as you said, are running out of cash, how they get access to cash during this disaster, to help fulfill their obligations while business is staggered.
Josh, extremely helpful. I know there are small business leaders and owners watching right now. So let's get into the process by which you can tap into those loans that the SBA is currently offering. And as we get started, will you please define what economic injury means in SBA speak?
Yes, sure, Pat. So today we're going to cover a PowerPoint that goes over how to apply to the loan, where to get access. But the economic injury are businesses that are suffering and cannot meet all obligations because they have a lack of resources. Businesses have been stifled, shut down, or slowed in amid this COVID-19 situation. So what we want to do is provide access to funds for that economic injury. That economic injury is things such as a business not being able to have normal hours to reach the same customer base. They're not drawing the same revenue that they would normally because of COVID-19 and the restrictions by the social distancing and certain business shutdowns.
Excellent. Thanks for the input. Josh, we're going to transition to your slide deck, and you can pick up on the SBA material as you're prepared.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Pat. And thank you again to the Regional Chamber for hosting this today and allowing the SBA to be a part of this. One of the things we want to roll into on the next slide, talking about economic injury disaster loans for coronavirus and related business needs, is what the actual program is and who is eligible to apply. Hopefully that comes through a little clearer. It is a bit fuzzy on my end, but businesses that are eligible to apply, thank you very much, are small businesses, small agriculture cooperatives, aquaculture businesses, and most private nonprofit organizations. Now, they must directly be affected by the disaster. This can't be a longstanding business issue where you have a lack of cash flow. But if you have, since COVID-19 has become an issue here in the United States and especially locally, if your business has suffered due to that, that's how you are affected by the disaster. Many businesses, due to state orders and social distancing requirements, had to shut down. We've seen a lot of businesses affected. To name a few, restaurants, different businesses that are social interaction type businesses, certain works, but not limited. We've seen every type of business apply, and the big thing is you have to be located in the disaster area. As of Friday, Ohio was put on the disaster declaration and was added to that area. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I cannot see if we're on the next slide, but everyone should see the economic injury disaster loan terms. Everyone wants to know how much they can borrow. It's up to $2 million, and then that's 3.75% interest rate for small businesses, and that's 2.75% for nonprofits. This is the type of loan, since this is a disaster loan as it relates to economic injury, nonprofits are eligible to apply for this. One of the big things is getting this information out is so important because a lot of businesses and owners that I've talked to recently were just forwarded to us. They didn't know that this program was going on, and then the terms. So we'll talk about how that can actually help a business, because these are payments, the loan funds are to be used by fixed debit payments. If you can go to the next slide, please. Fixed debit payments, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills. This is how the loan funds are to be used. It is not for dividend payments, disbursements to owners, facility expansion, refinance of long-term debts, or physical damage. This is strictly for economic injury due to COVID-19. And you can also not use these loans for payment of federal debt. So if we can click to the next slide, what we'll talk about further in the presentation is the economic injury terms. So it's up to $2 million, as you heard me mention previously. But for up to $25,000, it can be unsecured. Anything over $25,000, the SBA is going to want to have collateral. Now, lack of collateral is not a reason for decline. However, if you don't have a home to put as collateral for a larger loan, the SBA will look for any available capital that it can put towards the loan to help secure that loan. Some people forget they have very big, heavy, expensive machinery and equipment related to their business that can also be used as collateral in some cases. And That is why it's important when you go through the loan process, which we'll talk about today, Patrick, is making sure that you cover all the issues that you may see in your business, to include lease payments for such large equipment if you're still paying on it. But we'll get into that in a further slide. Next slide, please. Some of the basic filing requirements, just so everyone is aware, in the application, there is a Form 5 and a 5C. The 5C is for the sole proprietors, and we'll actually have a screen where we bring that up at the very beginning of the application, where Pat and I will both speak from personal experience of how you make sure you want to select the proper designation of your business so it takes you to the correct application. Then we have the IRS 4506T, which is for the applicant and principals and affiliates of the business. And then the business federal income tax return, schedule of liabilities filled out on Form 2202, and then a personal financial statement that must be signed. That's SBA Form 413. Next slide, please. Okay, so other information that may be requested is year-end financials. So what we have seen, a lot of businesses that maybe started out last year, or some that asked for an extension or have yet not filed, is their 2019 tax returns. So what you are going to have to make sure you include is an interim P&L, or current profit and loss statement, and then the SBA Form 1368 for your monthly sales. Next slide, please. So as we go into ineligible entities, I actually have some more examples than what's just on the slides. But ineligible entities are farms, religious organizations, gambling concerns, casinos and racetracks, as well as SBA loan packagers, lobbyists, real estate developers, and concerns that may have credit available elsewhere. Next slide, please. So here is the screen of how to apply. This is so great because I know that they are making this accessible through the regional chamber. If you click on that link, or you jot that URL down, it'll take you directly to the live site. As you can see, that's a picture of what disasters teams look like when they go in and set up, and they are processing and evaluating everything that you put in. And that is an example of a past disaster when they set up. But the paper loan applications are available. We do not recommend this because it can be more timely. So if you would like to fill it out and then mail it in, the mailing address is listed there as 14925 Kingsport Road, Fort Worth, Texas, 76155. However, again, if you can apply online through the live site, it is a little bit better for two reasons. Reason A is you don't have to worry about mailing in the package and it is done in real time. And reason two is the application is computer-based, so it will not let you move on if certain areas are not filled out. It helps you complete a full package. Some of the asterisk areas will turn red and not let you move to the next page if you have forgotten a key piece of information. One of the things that I do want to highlight on this slide, if you can, please jot down the 1-800 number. This is actually for the customer service, for disaster customer service. Also, their email address is listed. Anytime that you are going to reach out to them, if you've already started an application, please have your application number handy so they can reference that and look your loan up if needed if you've started that application. Again, that customer service center number is 1-800-659-2955. And then the email address is also listed below at disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. Next slide, please. So completing the application, as I mentioned earlier about the live application, one of the big things is doing a live application is going to help you make sure you don't miss anything by some of the asterisk parameters in the boxes that don't let you move forward. That can be one of the biggest causes of delay, is not having a complete application or having a processor have to come back and ask for additional information or documentation. And one thing I do want to definitely highlight before we move to the next slide is please, please, please make sure you're putting an active email and phone number where you can be reached. We've had some instances already, and this is a lesson learned, where we needed to try to find a good contact number or an email for someone. So please fill out both a good contact number and an email address when you are filling out and registering to start your application. Next slide, please. So this is what DLAP looks like, the Disaster Loan Application Portal. The reason we have this picture up here so everybody can see the three circles. On the left circle is the red circle that says eligible disaster area. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, is certain states and areas were declared disaster areas. Ohio was added to that list on Friday. But if you're looking or forwarding this information or possibly viewing us from another state or area, you can actually go into that red circle and it'll allow you to filter down your state and look by specific county. Your county has to be listed on that site. Again, Ohio was added on Friday, but at any time, if you want to check for any other counties added, you go into that red circle for eligible disaster areas to verify that. Now, what we're going to do to start the application is we're going to double click on the blue circle in the middle to apply online. But just so you know, you can always go in and use the green circle, check application status, and you can go back in and look at your application. Please always have your application number handy just in case. And as we'll move on to the next slide, we'll actually show what the apply online looks like. This is where you register. This is very important. Some of you on this call, I know we have a lot of people on this call that have already started applications. Please make sure that you have done a good password that you can remember. And in case you forget it, make sure your password reset questions are something that you can remember. It's very important to have access to this site because you may have to go in later. And providing that key contact information is very vital in this process. Should someone need to get a hold of you, we want the best email and phone number listed for that. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, as we move through the process here, we want to talk about completing registration information. This is kind of what I've already reminded everyone to make sure these sections are filled out and the unique password and security questions. Next slide, please. So as a reference point, as most of you are aware, we have 2 presentations uploaded, and depending on time, we will actually, Pat and I will go over a slide or 2 out of the other presentation as key information. But as reference point for our district office, as you heard me mention earlier, we are staffing 7 days a week, even weekend hours for calls and questions. Now, the district office, we are not processing the loans. However, we are here to assist you in any way possible. And I have Dave Townsend, who is a lender relations specialist, and Jerome Jones as well is a lender relations specialist in both Shannon and Talia in Columbus. Their information is listed. As most of you noticed, my information was given when this evite was sent out. I am also reachable at the Cincinnati branch office of the SBA. We'll put that information out as well to all the participants should they have follow-up. We can go to the next slide. One thing I want to highlight is, as you can see, we list the Cleveland district office because we do know we have some people participating in Northern Ohio. But to give you an example, if you're possibly joining us from Indiana, or if you've been forwarded this link by a friend or family member or coworker, if you're in other states, please make sure you're contacting the SBA district office for that state. If you're in Kentucky or Indiana, if you go to Google and put in SBA for Indiana or Kentucky, it'll give you their district office and their contact information. The reason this is so important is obviously we are the federal government and we have the EIDL loan program and federal assistance available to you, but certain states are doing other things. We want to make sure you get in touch with the local SBA office so they can also put you in contact with any of their local resource partners that can give you additional information for any state programs, and they can also give you information from that district. Next slide, please. Okay, I know we're not going to go quite into Q&A. Pat and I wanted to discuss a few other things as well as reference a couple slides out of the other PowerPoint presentation that was attached. Pat, if you can go ahead with that, please.
Thanks, Joshua. I was also looking through, we do have an abundance of questions. I read most of them. There's almost 40 questions, and there are several questions that look like they could be bundled and grouped into the same category.
Okay.
So when we get over to the Q&A session, I'm going to try to paraphrase some of those for you so you can cover more than one at a time. But I also wanted to, before we go to those specific questions, Josh, I also wanted to ask you if you could just talk briefly a little bit about what our callers can expect for a normal processing time on an SBA application from application to disbursement, and tell us what's normal. Tell us what we can expect.
Okay, Pat, I'm glad you asked that. Unfortunately, to use the word normal during this time is hard. What we are giving people is a time range. What we want to say is we know some of you probably, I've not seen the questions, but I know it's going to come out about the system being slow. That has been addressed and there's already fixes been put in place. And I see the reaction from Pat, and I know this has come up from people that we've both talked to in the past day. They've already made some patches and done some fixes that have made things a little easier. So that'll hopefully get faster, which will also help the applications get submitted sooner. Previously, we were looking anywhere from 16 to 21 days. That also is if the package is complete. Remember, I stressed earlier, make sure you have a complete application so they're not following up with you. Some of the questions that may come up as well is about loan amounts. People were not able to put in a loan amount that they were looking for because it was grayed out. Well, don't worry. Part of this application time and up to 30 days for disbursement is figured in a part of that loan amount. You're going to have a processor call you after you submit your application. So we may have 16 to 21 days, another 5 days for processing, and then disbursements another 5 days after that. But that's why getting that complete application is so vital to helping minimize that delay in time. I know that, like I said, the word normal is something that's very hard to use now, but just look at it in that time frame that I've kind of outlined and use your resources as necessary. And Pat, before we move on to the next one question that was actually posed, and I know it's probably going to come up a lot before this even started. Someone asked about having someone fill this out for them. Yes, that can be done. You can have assistance. There are even businesses that are out there that are able to charge a small fee to help you fill this out. But a lot of this is online. You have a lot of free resources out in the community to help you with this. So I urge you please to log online and see if you can do it through yourself instead of having to pay someone. But those resources are out there available if some of the questions seem daunting or you just not as technically savvy and you want help. That is available, and they even have a section for that person to include their name if you had help filling out the application.
Josh, before you spin off of that question entirely, I've done 3 of these myself, so I could speak to a little bit of that from my own personal experience, but based on what the SBA might consider to be a reasonable amount of time, how long do you think it's going to take the average applicant to complete the application on their own?
So I've heard different time frames from some people from 1 to 3 hours, depending on the accessibility. I think that also is your accessibility information to be able to get everything and upload it. Some businesses, I know you already have a current P&L statement handy. Some others have to, finalize theirs to be able to include that information. So obviously we know that plays a part into it, as well as the system lag time and being able to send in your documentation and upload. So that's why I give that range. I've heard as fast as an hour, but again, that's not the norm.
So in my last application that I completed just as recently as 2 days ago, it took me about 5 hours to complete it from start to finish, but that also includes significant downtime due to being able to, an inability to be able to upload documents. So staying on that same theme, because I see these questions in the Q&A as well, can you talk briefly, now that I've done 3, I don't have those common pitfalls, but what do you think are some of the common errors that you guys are seeing, and what are some of the oversights that applicants are already making?
That is a great question. I'm glad you bring that up, because in the presentation too, and I don't know if the person driving the slideshow can pull up presentation 2, slide 13. Starting off and making sure that you're selecting the right business type is one of the #1 issues that we saw early on, is people weren't sure what to select. Making sure that you select the correct business type, whether you're an LLC or a sole proprietor, actually feeds you into a form, whether you're filling out the 5 or 5C, which is for sole proprietor. 5 would be for your LLCs and things of that nature. Now that is super important because as that kind of spits you into the application process, it steers you to certain questions that is designated to what you selected. So making sure you select your correct business structure. And again, that is slide 13 in the PDF presentation that we have attached to this invite. So I encourage everyone, it's actually a screenshot so you can see what that looks like. One of the next things is, remember, this is for economic injury. There's actually a box to click that says economic injury. If you accidentally click physical damage or property damage, it'll start having you answer different questions, and then that'll take more time because you're going to have to back out of the application. Pat, I see you nodding. I think that was one thing that someone gave you feedback on as well. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly. I had the same problem. I had a client I was helping complete the application, and they got to the property damage section. It was illuminated. We realized that we'd gone too far already, and this was an application I picked up midstream. They had checked on the box early on in the application in the initial forms, and it had carried all the way through. So correcting those errors takes a lot of time.
Now, for the sole proprietors that may be on the call listening, just to let you know, you may have something come up where it asks about home damage, but that is a different stream because you clicked sole proprietor. Now, if you are a sole proprietor, you're on the right application. Don't worry. If you see that, just make sure you still have clicked the radio button that says economic injury. Remember, when this was first rolled out, as part of SBA's disaster program, a lot of this was over physical damage for tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes. Well, we've now added economic injury to kind of go along with COVID-19 and SBA and the nation's response to that.
Josh, while I have you, I have another kind of a broad question I'd like to address. If you could just take a couple of minutes. Based on your own experience, what do you think some of the tips and tricks of the system might be that would help some of our callers today to avoid some of the common pitfalls that even I've experienced already? And I'm sure that you've seen in some part. In fact, one of the questions repeatedly asked so far in the chat box was that the system was down as recently as 5 to 10 minutes ago. I've seen that pop up several times. Any other tips and tricks if the system is up and operating that you might be able to offer?
So always make sure you're writing down your loan application number on the top left when you come in. And I was looking to see, we don't have the other presentation up, but you'll see some of the screenshots, those that access it later. As you go through the process, it'll have it at the top. So if you forgot to write it down in the beginning, don't worry, there's a place. Save and save often. Have that written down in case you have to come back into the application and start anything over. I have been told that they were working on fixes to help with some of the lag times. The reason the lag time has happened in the application, as you know, several other states have been added in the past 2 days as disaster declarations. What that means is the system, even though there are several different servers that it's working off of, is being bogged down. I've had some small businesses call me and said that they were able and had the ability to do it during off hours, off-peak hours. I do not say that you have to do that, but as it spreads out, if some of you are doing off-peak hours, it obviously spreads out the amount that are on during normal hours, and it allows the system to catch up.
Joshua, this is Mary Stagaman, Patrick Griffith's colleague at the Chamber, and I wanted to interrupt for just a moment to remind you that the second slide deck that you referred to is on your desktop, not ours. So if you want to pull up a slide, you'll need to share from your screen. Also wanted to alert everyone on the webinar that that deck will be available on the Chamber website later today at cincinnati-chamber.com. If they just go to the button on COVID resources, they will be able to locate that. We've had many questions about what do we do while the site is down. And one suggestion we would have is if they go through that bigger deck that you've provided, they will be able to assemble what they'll need for the application while they're waiting to get into the site to actually start loading it.
Perfect. Mary, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Please let me know. Now, I have the other presentation. It was already queued up on my desktop. Please let me know if everyone can see it, because Pat and I do not see the same screen as everybody
I'm seeing it right now, Joshua, so I think we're good. We'll ask our audience if someone can't see it to let us know. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. No, Thank you so much. And obviously, like I said, our screen's a little different, but you should be seeing slide 13. I'm looking at it now. It is in PDF format on my desktop, so hopefully everybody can see the same thing. And it's the disaster loan assistance page. This is actually giving you a view of what you'll see when you start to go in the application process that Pat and I mentioned earlier. The reason we wanted to show you this is so you can see the radio buttons where it actually has you click LLC, LLP, private nonprofit organization. That's where you need to be very careful that you are clicking the correct structure of your business, how it's in your documents of incorporation or how you file your taxes. That is how you will be guided into the application as you hit next. Remember, don't forget to save. And to Mary's point, I really like that. And as we're using this webinar, obviously we're all in different locations, but we're trying to get this information to you and screen share different things, such as this PowerPoint presentation that walks through. So if the site is down currently, you can actually look ahead to what you will be asked. And the example, it actually shows you examples of where the gentleman will actually upload his taxes, and it'll allow him to update it or start the next section for business taxes. And as you kind of scroll through, it talks about the checks and balances that are in place on this digital application system that allow you to ensure every section is done in its entirety. Pat, I know you have a couple more questions or things that we kind of want to cover, so let me turn it back to you for a moment.
Questions are piling up. I got about 65 active questions. I've answered about 18 of them on your behalf, the things that were simple and straightforward. There are some questions that are a little bit more complex, but I want to start to go through those with you because it is about 12:34 and we have about 26 minutes. So I know that I can't get through all of them, but I'm going to try to get through some of the bigger ones. There's a common theme that I'm seeing that I want to get out of the way fairly quickly. I'm seeing a lot of questions around agricultural businesses. Can you talk briefly about the qualifications, if any, for agriculture specifically?
So for agriculture specific, it goes along, I'm actually looking for the reference material, agriculture cooperatives. If it is in an agriculture or agriculture cooperative can apply. The farms, however, farms are ineligible businesses. That's one thing to make sure you point out. And the same thing with the rest of the application process is it'll start to guide you through when you click the radio button. It'll actually, and I'm turning my screen here so I can see what the audience is seeing. It actually gives you the option to click corporations, private nonprofit, and limited partnerships. Now remember, if you're under a corporation or a cooperative, make sure you're clicking the right thing. It will push you into the correct application so you can add the proper documentation.
Along that same line, does the SBA have a particular definition? Is there a place where we can send callers to look for the definition of what categorically is a farm?
Okay, for that one, we have a couple ways that depending on how many callers we have for that, the disaster customer service email that I sent, you can send it there. You can reach one of the local staff members. We can get an answer for you. I do not have a definition that I can read over the PowerPoint. That is the first time that I've had that question come through here at the Cincinnati office so far, but we will be able to get an answer, and hopefully when we do follow up, we'll publicize that as well. But please reach out to your local contacts or the disaster customer service email or phone number.
Excellent, thank you. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
There's another question I have about nonprofits. In fact, I see 3, maybe 4 questions around nonprofits, but I wanted to clarify for you so I don't put you too much on the spot. I see that one of the nonprofit references up here is for nonprofit membership organizations, which is the 503c6. And I know we have several definitions of what nonprofits are. Can you broadly address the application of disaster loans for nonprofits on this call?
Yes, so actually I'm looking to stop sharing my screen.
Hey, Joshua, it's Michelle at the Chamber. Your screen is currently not shared. So if you want to share it again, you'll just have to click share screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Patrick, what I was trying to do as we were talking about that, as you noticed, we talked earlier about nonprofits with 2.75% interest rate on nonprofits. They are eligible. However, I do have some guidance for nonprofits and what they would have to upload. So it is actually situational. If that person can actually reach out to me directly, I can provide them more in depth to their situation. But in general, they have to still include articles of incorporation, bylaws, and then the board of directors giving approval to apply under the SBA disaster loan. That's a requirement that may be provided to be able to offer the loan. And then they have to complete copies of the most recent nonprofit tax returns, or, very important, or a copy of the organization's IRS tax exempt certification. Those are a couple examples of general overview of how the nonprofit application will differ. And then, of course, their interest rate, as I mentioned before, is going to be at the 2.75% interest rate for nonprofits, where it was 3.75% for small businesses. But the application difference is slightly different. You still have to include all the names and addresses of all officers, trustees, and directors when it's a non-for-profit application.
Joshua, on the tail end of that question, because it's a complex answer, do you have other resources in the greater Cincinnati area where folks could go to get specific support? I got a question about the SBDC. Is that an appropriate place for you to send folks? Because this is complex, and I know some of your answers are complex.
Right, and unfortunately, since we had over 360 participants on the call, some of them are very circumstantial to each individual business. We have been telling people, please use us as the SBA. People have been coming to the regional chamber. You're a great local resource. SBDC, SCORE, all the local resource partners, as we are all trying to help small businesses through this COVID-19 situation. So for specific ones, I say reach out to your resource partners. You are exactly right. Use us at the SBA, use the SBDC, our partners. We're working with them. Sometimes, because this is a very new process, the first person you get may not have an answer, but we're not going to turn you away. We're going to get someone involved to get that answer. So please use all your local free resources in a time like this.
Couple of borrowing questions that are a little bit more micro-driven.
Okay.
Does the borrower have to show evidence of application or declination from a financial institution before applying for the loan, or should they just go ahead and apply for the loan?
No, we encourage all businesses to apply right now. What they're looking at, and I kind of mentioned this a little earlier, is you will get someone that'll call you to figure out your time horizon. Everyone says, hey, I can't put in a number for my loan amount. Remember, you're putting in to show that and give instances that you have been affected by COVID-19, that you need capital right now to meet your obligations as a small business owner. So what I encourage businesses to do is apply. You don't need a decline from someone else. This is for disaster assistance. It's a specific working capital loan for disaster assistance as it relates to COVID-19. And you apply, and then you will get someone to work with you on that.
Thanks, Joshua. I have another very specific question that might pertain to multiple people in the call. It looks like it's come up a couple of times. I'm going to broadly frame this question so that you can answer it most broadly rather than be very specific.
Okay.
If a company is incorporated or established in a particular state, say, for example, Kentucky, and they're a Kentucky business, but they're actually operating in Ohio, do they apply as a Kentucky company or as an Ohio company?
You're going to actually apply where your business files taxes, where your articles of incorporation have you set. So it's a little tricky because we're on the river and a lot of businesses float back and forth. But where do you pay the taxes on your business taxes is the first question. And then obviously if your business for your EIN number and all tax purposes is listed in a certain state, that is the state you will be applying to the disaster assistance.
So if Kentucky is not a disaster area, a caller on today's call might not be eligible for this loan if their business is located in Kentucky and it's not a disaster area.
I encourage that caller to actually look on that website on the live application, the circle on the left-hand side. You can filter it by state and specific county to see if your area, most states have been coming on and declaring disaster areas. Please, for that specific instance, go on and check to make sure your county and state has been added. But no, it's where your business is centralized, where your headquarters is, where you pay taxes, and where you're incorporated or where you're structured.
Josh, because I also know you well and I know some of your other activities, I see several questions around affiliations. More than one question says, I own multiple businesses. Do I need to apply for each business separately? So what we're getting at is affiliation. And
Yes.
Can you briefly talk about affiliations in the application process?
Okay, so affiliations, and some people may not be as familiar as if a business has a minority share or stake in another business. However, we've had a couple instances, and this may, and again, if there's any question, as some of these are broad, if you need more clarification or more answer, Pat, if they actually respond and want a deeper dive, please let me know, and we'll try to be respectful of that with the time we have. But in this particular instance, we had a restaurant owner who had more than one restaurant. They were affiliated, however, they were in different counties. So the thing to realize is if I have a different EIN, or if I'm applying under another county's disaster declaration, I need to have a separate application for that. Even though, say, I am the owner of two restaurants, I have Josh's Wing Spot and I have Josh's Roofing, and they are affiliated, or two different restaurants, however you want to make this example, but they're in two separate counties, I need to have two separate applications because it's under the actual county declaration. As well as the other point is the EIN number. Businesses have to figure out if they have a different EIN number. If that's the case, they have to fill out a separate application. There's one piece of important information I want to put out for business owners that have an affiliation or several businesses. It is still a $2 million cap. It is not a $2 million total for each one of your businesses. So if I have 4 businesses and I am filing 4 separate or 2 separate applications, I am up to $2 million total for the collective, not each business. Does that answer that question, Pat? I know you're still trying to read off a couple questions, so I want to make sure that that came through okay on your end.
Yes, in fact, there are some that are extremely similar. I have a couple where folks own an LLC and a corporation and also are in limited partnerships. So some of these are more complex. You probably should deal with those on a one-on-one basis after the call. But I have a lot that are around affiliation. And I also see several questions about personal guarantee of the loan. Can you talk briefly about the personal guarantee, if there is any?
So as I was outlining the loan amounts earlier, so you can actually personally guarantee him without securing the loan up to $25,000. So you would sign and you would give the personal guarantee of $25,000. But after $25,000, depending on the amount, obviously, that you need to meet your obligations, they're going to look for collateral. We've had some instances where people did not have a home to put for collateral, or they were actually already had part of their home on collateral for another loan. Now remember, the SBA will look to go ahead and get whatever collateral they can for that amount. Now, that's when you're going to work with that processor. As I kind of mentioned earlier, once you finish the application process, they're going to have someone call you and reach out to walk through your time horizon of what the business needs are to meet all obligations. And then they're going to figure out what that means. Because just because in your head you think it may be $1 million, once that time horizon is put together, it may be more or less than that. And that's why it's important to know what collateral you have, what's available, and then also work with that person in processing.
Excellent. That ties right into the next question. If I have credit available elsewhere, does that make me ineligible for the disaster loan?
So credit available elsewhere does make you ineligible. However, there's been some confusion with some applicants of what that means. Just because you have a credit line somewhere does not necessarily mean you have a credit available elsewhere in this instance, because remember, it's all about the time horizon. It depends on what your line of credit looks like. So those are things where we have urged businesses either to have a dialogue with one of our lender relations specialists or someone in the local office, or to apply. Because remember, just because I may have a $10,000 line of credit with the local bank does not mean that I am automatically ineligible for the disaster assistance loan. Because remember, right now there's uncertainty of how long this may go on for. So your business may need more than that $10,000 line of credit that you have available currently.
Well put.
And then the other thing that, to Pat, just to kind of expand on that a little bit more, that's another reason. So we've had a couple businesses that have a spouse that is not an owner in the business. But when you are actually submitting, and I have a feeling this is probably a question, I can't see them, but I can see your face. So one of the things I want to make sure everyone's aware of, they actually have the spouse sign and date because they look at your personal financial statement. Even though they may not have a stake in the company as a spouse, they consider share assets. So if for some reason your spouse may have a lot of money in the bank and may make you ineligible for a loan, that's why they're looking for that. That also may show credit available elsewhere because of the resources that a spouse may have access to, which would make you credit available elsewhere, not just having a line of credit. And just to explain to people on this broad call that we have 315 people still currently on to say, hey, that's why they're asking for your spouse to sign and date that personal financial statement, is because they want to make sure that you don't have that credit available elsewhere. You may not as the business owner, but what about your spouse?
Yeah. I have another question that's kind of along that same line. Can you use an SBA disaster loan to essentially refinance other SBA-backed loans?
No. One of the things we mentioned in the presentation, I'm not sure if that person was on at this time, but it is not to repayment of stock loans, facility expansions, refinance long-term debt, or payment of federal debt. So federal debt would be any of the other SBA type loans, or if you have other federal debt that you're trying to pay off with this loan. Now remember, even if it's like even a 7A loan, you can't use this to refinance, so to say, one of your other SBA type loans.
I see a couple of questions around perception of the disaster loan program. So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit.
I'm sorry, Pat,
Can you hear me?
cut out. Question on what? I'm sorry.
Questions more on more administrative in nature. Here's a perception question.
Okay.
We've been paying attention what people are saying in the media. Are any of these loans, or could these loans be forgiven over time that we're applying for through the disaster loan program?
Okay, so what we can put out at this time is the SBA can only speak to what has already been passed through Congress, Senate, and signed by the president. There are other stimulus packages that are working their way through different levels of the government. However, we cannot speculate and say something will or will not be paid off or forgiven at this time, because we can only speak in real time. As, for example, the EIDL loan is available and approved, so we can talk about that at length. But there are things they are working on. As we have updates, I've already coordinated, Pat, I know yourself and Mary at the Chamber. If things come up, and to this caller's question, if things come up and we get updates and new programs, we will circle back to hopefully have a follow-on training for updates. Because in the coming weeks, as this whole situation expands, I anticipate to have new information to put out. But at this time, we cannot speculate if they will or will not be forgiven. We can only talk about what's already approved.
Does the SBA set a minimum credit score for applicants?
So that is done at the processor level. So what I will tell you is make sure you have your tax documents ready. They will look at that, and they will also look at your ability to repay. That's one of the biggest things. It also depends on the amount. There's not a magic number that I have that I can throw out on the webinar at this time, but I will say make sure your application is complete and you give that information.
If I apply for a loan today and I feel like I need the cash in order to fund my operation, but then I get approved and the loan is dispersed, and I may find later that I'm able to sustain my operations. Now, I don't necessarily need that money. Will I face a prepayment penalty for paying the loan off early?
No, that's a great question. And also to that same question, if you don't need as much, it's easier to give it back then to go back in and request for more money. So if you end up paying it off early, you're not penalized, or if you don't need as much. So say, Pat, in your example, if you were given $100,000, we would issue that money. And then if all of a sudden this starts to resolve itself and you don't need that, that is not a problem. You will not be assessed a prepayment penalty or early payoff penalty for that.
You covered a question earlier about using the SBA disaster loan to maybe pay off or refinance other federal loans. So we took that off the table. This one's not too far off. If I have an SBA loan, another type, maybe a 504 or a 7A, can I still qualify for a disaster loan, assuming that I wouldn't be paying that off or refinancing it? Can I have this one in addition to?
Yes, that is actually a possibility. Now, for this specific caller, I will want to talk to you directly because obviously you have to be in good standings in that loan. But it is not a problem if you currently have a 7A loan because that was for expenses at that time, or if you have a 504 loan, if you were buying equipment or a building. COVID-19 has changed the game, unfortunately, and we all are experiencing as small business owners that economic injury. That is what this disaster assistance for, which is very different than the 504 and the 7A as they would have been awarded to you previously or dispersed previously. So please apply. If you have a need for access to capital at this time as it relates to COVID-19, please apply to the disaster assistance loan, or also known as the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
Excellent lead into my next question. Josh, I only have about 4 minutes left for questions.
Okay.
I'm going to try to get through some of these quickly. Will the SBA accept a second position on collateral on a disaster relief loan?
The SBA will try to secure any type of collateral it can. So we have actually had that question. It was on a training call that I was on the other day, and they can, if there is capital still or collateral still left that they can take a second position on, they can look into that as an option. That must be from a banker.
I believe that was from a banker. Do personal guarantees apply to nonprofits in the disaster loan process?
So on that one, I'm referring to my nonprofit checklist over here. If that person can actually reach out to me directly, as mentioned earlier, nonprofits, we usually hadn't in the past done direct lending to. However, this is a very unique situation. So we have some guidance on that. And there is some information that I can provide with any nonprofit. We're also sharing this information with our resource partners. So as you reach out to us here at the SBA, the Regional Chamber, or SBDC or SCORE, we will also make sure we all have that information to respond to the nonprofits, because we know they are also deeply affected by COVID-19.
Excellent. One other administrative question, and then I might have time for another.
Okay.
Is there any distinguishment between a certified minority business through the SBA's disaster loan and a small business of any other sort that might not be a minority business?
No, right now, a small business applies, and I'm glad that you brought that out because also time in business is not what they're looking at. Some programs, because this is a disaster and it's looking to help all businesses that are having economic injury as it relates to COVID-19, there are not special limitations, requirements, or restrictions for type of business or term of business other than the businesses that I said could not apply, such as your farms, and gambling institutions. But no, we want all small businesses that are affected by this to apply, and everyone has equal ability to gain access to these disaster funds in that way.
Down to 1 minute, Joshua.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the payment terms will be for these loans?
So that's going to depend on the time horizon. As I mentioned earlier, that's a great question. So to anyone this applies to, please know when the processor calls you from the disaster center to talk about your application, they're going to help you create a time horizon for repayment. And they're going to look at a business's ability to repay. So they're going to look at the total amount needed to meet all obligations. They're going to figure in your interest rate and then what your monthly payment would be and help you find out the terms in an affordable amount. So I can't tell you the exact amount, but I know that as you work with them, you will know ahead of time before you sign those documentations what your monthly payment and term of time would look like.
Joshua, before I wrap up, sir,
Yes,
I've
sir.
been able to get through, looks like about 30, 60 questions. I'm going to leave about 77, maybe 80 questions on the table.
Okay.
After this call concludes, which I'm going to wrap up momentarily, is there going to be a specific place, telephone, email address, anything you want to share with the callers that are left on the call where they can reach you?
Yes. So everyone that is in the Cincinnati area, my direct information is Joshua, Joshua .Stutzman, Stutzman @sba.gov. However, for those very specific questions that we mentioned earlier, please reach out to the Columbus District Office staff that was listed there. The Cincinnati branch actually falls under the Columbus District Office. And with the amount of, like you said, 77 more questions, unfortunately, I'm one person. I cannot field all 77 calls in one day. So please also use those additional resources. And my telephone number is area code 305-582-1311. That is my SBA cellular telephone at 305-582-1311. But please, please also use the other resources I've provided in email in the slideshow, especially, like I said, LRS, Dave Townsend, who is the lead LRS, and Jerome Jones. I know we have some bankers on the call. So please, everyone, reach out to us, but not every 363 participants call Joshua Stutzman, but we do want to make ourselves available. So please use all of the resources I've provided today.
Joshua, thank you for your time today. We know you're leaving some questions on the table. In fact, thank you for sharing your follow-up information. We'll make sure we address as many of those as we can after the call. I'm available via telephone or email as well, working from home. We'll update you with any new information that becomes available in the next few weeks. I know legislation is still pending, and a lot of new information will come forth after that. So Joshua, please stay in touch with us. If we can do an update call again in the future that might refresh some of these things, I'm happy to host that with you. We're grateful that you took the time during this crisis to share your knowledge and your perspectives with our members and partners throughout the region. You know there's a lot of stakeholders in the 16-county region, and you've reached a good number of them today. We're forever grateful. Thank you, sir. Thanks to our audience for joining the call today. You can find more information on business briefings on our chamber hotline and more at cincinnati-chamber.com. On Thursday, we'll host Dr. Chantel Thomas to discuss mental health issues and solution strategies for leaders and individuals to manage stress and reduce anxiety in this time. I know I'll be listening in on that conversation for sure. I hope that you'll join me. Our entire team at the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber is dedicated to keeping our business community united through the crisis and as strong as we can as we recover collectively as a community. Please let us know how we can be of assistance to you. Reach out to us. We have people at work working remotely and some folks still in the office. In the meantime, stay safe and respect your social distancing guidelines. And as always, please make sure you wash your hands frequently and stay healthy. Thank you all for participating on the call today. Joshua, again, thank you. This concludes our briefing for today.
Thank you again, Patrick, and to the chamber. Thank you.